Yeah, welcome to part 3 of our workshop series, Overcoming Issues with Awakening. Today we want to talk about how to choose our path. How can we take all this spiritual thinking, this spiritual feeling, this spiritual, doing, and all the issues that come up with this, and form something like a concept or something that makes sense to us. Yeah, how can we put this all together so that we become able to realize what all this spiritual development, consciousness work, as we often call this, is for. And if you have listened to part 1 and 2, where we exchanged some of the personal struggles and conceptual struggles, like understanding certain things, you've already realized that there are worlds behind worlds, there are realities within realities. They really depend on our perception, they depend on our life view, how we see ourselves in this world, and basically also beyond this world. So we discussed aspects of life and afterlife in part 2 and came to the same conclusions as we have come to with ourselves already, namely that there are a multitude of inner and outer hurdles to overcome when we set out on this journey. This journey to heal ourselves, perhaps in the beginning, but then we realize that healing is pretty much the same as growing. So there's no growth without healing. You can see this here schematically. I don't want to go deeper into this. I've produced a 21-part series on YouTube for this. So the micro steps. And the only reason why I'm showing this here is to remind us of the circular nature. So we've investigated aspects, not entirely answered, but aspects of this transformation that happens when we awaken. Something that is often referred to as the death of the ego or ego identity. The lower aspect of our I, and the impulse to seek truth, the impulse to understand, to gain insights around our inner and outer experiences. Today we will cover those again, but perhaps maybe in a larger or bigger context, namely in the context of what actually happens when we engage with the spiritual nature of our reality, when we start to connect with our true self, when we start to heal, when we start to read spiritual literature, when we start getting interested, when we start talking spirits or energies with others, when we exchange, when we begin to cultivate our relationship with our true self, later than our higher self, when we begin to understand the true nature of our being, and with it then begin to gain spiritual sight, yeah, which is not limited to seeing. Seeing is just one tiny aspect, and in many of my courses where I train spiritual sight with you, the energy course being sort of the core of this training, I explain that the sight is actually almost more deceiving than our other spiritual senses that we form through, nurturing our spiritual connection, yeah, our spiritual organs that form as a consequence of us engaging with our spiritual nature. And therefore, spiritual sight should not be confused or mixed up with clairvoyance. So clairvoyance is just, it's an older term for psychic abilities, for someone who has, discovered and refined their psychic abilities, their spiritual abilities. But really, what it tells us is a certain level of understanding, yeah, so like a wisdom, yeah, that comes forward or is remembered when we enlighten ourselves, when we nurture, when we feed our inner light, that then allows us to see, yeah, in quotation marks, more clearly who we are, where we came from, where we're going, why we're here. And perhaps also the bigger questions about the cosmos, the universe, why all this is here and why all of us are doing this and what this is all for. All right, so this is my intro here. Yeah, I hope that you guys have questions. Yeah, this is why I'm choosing to do this in this workshop format, not just as a lecture. So I'm waiting for your input, for your questions. So never hesitate. Yeah. However, refrain from just commentary. Okay, so chiming in or commiserating and things like that. They do not allow us to go deeper. They hinder us to go deeper. We have other places, other communities and frameworks within. It's all about the personal sharing and like gaining a little more insight about how this process is experienced by others. So here we want to really train our way of looking at ourselves and the world, the divine spirit, all of these things that are entailed in our spiritual seeking, in our seeking for truth. And therefore, we can talk about issues that come as a consequence, of diving into the unknown, yeah, into our spiritual reality, yeah, which for the most part is the unknown for us, yeah, in the beginning, such as, feeling overwhelmed, confused, disoriented, scared, or seriously inflated, yeah, feeling small. Yeah, those are all things that are common and part of your spiritual development. Is there anything you would like to add to this list, this general list of what the issues are when one sets out to explore the unknown? to explore the spiritual reality that we all feel, that we can all sense it's there, but that is mostly dark or undisclosed to us when we start our spiritual journey. So, anything else that you would like to add? I don't want to forget anything.
Jona,
Yes,
can you hear me okay? It's
yes,
Janet.
I do. Hi, Janet.
Yeah, hi. Um, One of the first few things that come to me is the feeling of like having experienced our 3D, my 3D with kind of guides. Like there's things in the system that were guides to get through
Mm-hmm.
school, how to make your food. And then though some of those kind of parameters go away, what you're used to in terms of functioning in our
Mm-hmm.
bodies in this world. So then with the spirituality part of it, it then leaves a lot open for misinterpretation
Okay.
and misguidance. So I'd
Mm-hmm.
say there's a combination of, there's disorientation. I guess it's a little disorientation that
Yeah, some
happens.
confusion, maybe a disbelief as well.
Well, I think it's less of that and a lack of identity with it. There's a lack of
Uh-huh.
a reference. It is that jumping off the cliff. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I did a parachute jump before, and it's kind of like that. You're like,
Feeling lost.
okay.
Feeling
a
lost.
different It's a different kind of trust that's
Mm-hmm.
maybe less familiar than most people, although obviously there's people who since childhood were able to keep the spiritual connection at this multi kind of feeling and functioning level. It tends to get, of course we know, wiped out by systematic things for
I
some
mean,
people.
what you're saying is like literally a shattering of our belief system. It's a
uh
collapse of some sort, a collapse
yeah, kind of
of a
like that.
framework.
Like, all right, well, all right.
Is that okay? Like a collapse
That's another way to put it.
of
Well,
framework.
it would be good. It kind of would be good. I think it's happened that way to me a few times where there is a collapse and then you have to kind of recalibrate. I had to
Mm-hmm.
recalibrate, and I can still see that still happen now, where the
Mm-hmm.
belief system does
You're blipping out a bit.
that. That's another part of it. Part of the
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you're not others or whatever each person comes with as a challenge. When I had my kids, I stood there, and luckily I had not a busy environment, quote unquote, where I could stand and observe them a little bit from a broader perspective. And I picked up that I was like, it seems like y'all came with, your 1, 2, 3 challenge. You have this challenge, this 3 challenges. You have 3 challenges to overcome in your life, and they're not hard, but it's just the system doesn't prioritize that. Like some people come with not being able to handle emotion, or some people come and are intellectually uh, predisposed, so that they might get more mental. And we can all overcome that when we have our spiritual connection and have that to nurture. So um, losing that, it's like losing the map almost.
Yeah,
Like at
no,
some point, lost the map.
I can feel what you're saying. I mean, it's a bit mental, it's a bit intellectual to call it framework, but we often talk about a roadmap. We often talk about a compass. Yeah, I guess framework. We lose like.
Because we know it is a feeling. It is a feeling, and
Mhm.
then some of us might be able to, like you were talking about, the psychic powers be able to translate into other things, but it really is that feeling. So yeah, it is hard to call.
It's a paradigm shift, really.
What's good about a map and a compass,
Yeah.
the dimension of those is a certain
Mm-hmm.
security. You know, yes, they're three-dimensional things, but if we go in and go, when I have a map, and how do I feel? How do I feel when I have a compass and I know which way is
Mm-hmm.
north and south? I think that helps that perception.
Yeah. Let's just call it this way. I mean, just so that we remember what was meant by that. I personally use the word roadmap a lot because it really feels that way. You know, where's the goal? How do I get there? You know, it's kind of like trying to find through a maze. And you know, when we start, you know, our spiritual journey, it's almost like it all gets wiped away. It's like the carpet gets pulled from underneath our feet, and all of a sudden we see ourselves standing in a new reality. But we have zero way of navigating it. We
Yeah,
don't
because
know where
there's,
it's up
you know,
and down.
suddenly you're
Yeah.
faced with your shadow, or you're faced with somebody's issue, and like everything that we've done to comb out our hair of what's mine, what's yours, is
Mm-hmm.
already you kind of caught in the brambles.
And that can be quite scary. That can be quite confusing, disorienting, overwhelming, exhausting.
I got scared at
Mm-hmm.
certain points. Like I didn't even know I was scared. I knew I was feeling something. It wasn't aligning with like being like woo, and I can recognize that now.
So it's quite a big thing, and so not what people think. What it's like is to be spiritual, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is something that we need to internalize here. That the reality, you know, of actually diving into these deeper aspects of who we are, where we're from, and where we are, okay, they can be quite shocking. This can be, you know, something that can take many, many lifetimes to process. Yeah, so there's a part in us, and we already named this part. We have a bunch of agreements here, like as far as the spiritual lingo that we want to use. So we have a name for the part in us that wants to have that map. Yeah, that wants to have everything laid out, you know, preferably with guarantee, right? And that's called ego. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And last time I said we get that for free. Okay. So it's the little pilot light that we have, yeah, that lets us know that we are we. So I am I. Yeah. So yeah, on the level of a 3-year-old, um, if we were to look at the human, you know, psychological developmental stages, yeah, we know that I'm I and you. Okay, and I got my map, and that is maximum gain, right? Maximum pleasure and minimum pain, right? Seeking pleasure, avoiding pain. That is the framework of our ego, yeah, which includes wanting security, wanting guarantees, wanting, you know, everything to be laid out in front of us, preferably with not a lot of work, with knowing all the shortcuts, with, you know, being able to hack the system. Yeah. And perhaps even some aspects of like, you know, the rules that apply to others don't apply to me because I'm so special or something like that. Yeah. So there's all these things that we've already investigated to the T. We do this in the Sacred Self Healing community. And with the help of the 24 steps, we go through, you know, these little illusions, but these little ego illusions, I call them little because they are quite little, actually, as we will find out, compared to the bigger context of things. However, that's the reality that we find ourselves having to contend with. That is until we step into our spiritual journey, until we answer the call, the seeking for truth, the seeking for more freedom, and the seeking for love, for true love. So these three impulses, yeah, when they come to us, and this happens though in sort of a spirally way. In other words, you know, freedom, truth, and love, they're like basically different frequency levels of the same. But each time, we kind of have to go through the same thing, just on a different level. And therefore, we, experience this as sort of a never ending story. And yet it's always the same, that we are finding ourselves needing to overcome. And that has to do with what these things, your overwhelm, exhaustion, disorientation, confusion, confrontation and truth, fear, and all these things, what they do to us. What do they do to us? This is the part that we also need to internalize. What does exhaustion, overwhelm, disorientation, confusion, fear, feeling small, what does that do to us? It has an effect on the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world, the way we see our own life. Perhaps we perceive our life as a struggle. Perhaps we feel that we're powerless, see our lives as a series of unfortunate events. We see ourselves as victims. We see ourselves as maybe punished by God. We see ourselves as abandoned. All these kind of things. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? These things that we then basically, out of our ego understanding of things, remember the ego being sort of the spiritual 3-year-old, that we're concluding.
Yeah, this like brings in, like, if you really think you're spiritual, you've done some of the things that are close to it, but it seems like the red pill is just going to keep taking it. It'll take it and then stop your prescription. It keeps growing and building. And there's very few people who at the beginning of my journey, and I feel like I've met some really quality people, but that residualness of like, okay, when's it's going to end? Sort of thing. It doesn't, and nobody ever goes, okay. People say life's a journey, and I'm just like, yeah, well, whatever. I don't know what you mean by that. Just like not knowing the feeling for it. I think one of the biggest issues especially at the beginning, is not being able to discern feelings and then control emotions to it, reactions, and then to lower the engagement of the mind. That starts a lot of these things that cause self-doubt and like, oh my, what, like no grasp of it, because it's so lost in our emotion and mind going back and forth. At least that's what I identified.
And this is really important what you just said, Janet, because that's what it feels like. Yeah, and I mean, we always deal with issues of our thoughts and our sentiments, and our physical conditions. Yeah, so these three, sort of material, physical, 3D minds that we have, yeah, our physical conditions, our emotions about that, or caused by that, and our thoughts about it. And then again, the emotions that we exert based on how we're thinking about things. So that's basically the endless loop that the ego is in. And that's why when we get overwhelmed by these initial awakening symptoms, if you will, if we get so overwhelmed that we stop there, then life will indeed feel like an endless struggle. what happens though when we, and this is partially why it's so important to share and why it's so important to seek the company, seek the community with people that are going through similar experiences. Yeah, since it's all inner experiences, subjective experiences, it's not something that you can just sort of read up in a textbook. I mean, one can go through the effort of trying to list as many as possible, but you can already see how hard it is with our language to find the right words to describe this inner experience. So it's really important that we rely on, our fellow humans, okay, that go through something similar, so that we understand, okay, all right, I'm not the only one. Yeah, there's apparently some kind of system behind this. Yeah, I may not get it all yet, but I don't need to worry. I don't have to get lost in this powerlessness or this darkness of self-doubt, yeah, or feeling lost. Yeah, so just on a side note here, this is really, really important that we understand this. Yeah, that there are certain things that come with, embarking on our spiritual journey, and they come for everyone. But there is a life after. Okay, it's not really after. I'm not talking about the afterlife. I'm talking about that it keeps going and it keeps developing, it keeps evolving, right? And that is what we need to learn to trust in, which is why I've picked up on these four main issues that I could categorize, and feel free to add one or two more that you can find that that I may not have included here. It's important that we recognize that these issues are part of the journey. This is not just you. There's nothing wrong with you. And this is part of the test, if you will. Yeah, we've already come to the conclusion that it's not an easy journey. And most of you already know that it's not a quick journey either. Yes, developing your spiritual organs, evolving spiritually, healing, purging, clearing all the stuff that has accumulated in you, and then ultimately integrating and embodying it. Now that's a lengthy process. And therefore, we often need the support of others. There are others that went through similar processes that know, sort of what the next step or what the next sort of thing is that you will encounter. And I've tried to summarize this here. The first thing that I've noticed is that people, and this is especially in the later, it started in the 2000s, when spirituality became somewhat mainstream, through multiple, authors and self-help gurus, success coaches, etc. Yeah, that spirituality is something like an upgrade. It is something that you can, you go to a weekend seminar and then you get it, then you sort of obtain it, and then it gives you an edge, like learning spells. And once you know all those spells, then you know how to hack life. Okay, this is one of the issues with that go hand in hand with the expectations. Yeah, the wrong or somewhat infantile expectations, okay, that, you know, growing into your spiritual self, yeah, would be something like a yeah, Julianne, you're saying quest here. It's not even like a quest, but that it would be something that you do, like a retreat, and then, you know, yeah, kind of like in a computer game, okay, where you go through different levels and you gain experiences and you get loot, and you know, you have better armor and better whatever, you know, weapons or tools or whatever, and it's sort of linear. So the problem that I'm seeing that people have, that then produces these false expectations and also their unrealistic goals, is that they're seeing it in a linear way. Yeah. So when you go on a spiritual journey, you are not going into like a computer simulation, guys. This is much bigger. All right. So spirituality is not an accessory. It's not like a spell or a drink or you know, like a switch in you. Yeah, you don't suddenly become spiritual and everything else in your life stays the same. That's not even a quest. It's much more than that. Now, when you
Seems
begin
like, oh,
to
sorry.
heal, when you, yeah, the whole the thought, when you start the journey of healing, all right, you can experience some changes in your life, some big changes. You might find out that the relationship that you're in, or the job that you're in, or the place where you live, or the kind of people that you socialize with, or you know, the kind of books or that you've read, or the whatever groups that you have subscribed to, are fundamentally working against you and your healing or your growth. Yeah. So the one of the biggest issue that people have, and why they quit or stand still in their spiritual journey, is because they don't understand, okay, that, or we don't understand that when we do this, we're about to change everything. And if you hear me out here to the end of this workshop, you're going to be shocked how much more will change when you walk your spiritual path. So much more than you thought. So it's this double-edged sword, right? We talked a little bit about this last time when we talked about seeking truth. You know, you can't seek truth and then just sort of pick the cherries. Yeah. So seeking truth means at the beginning of your journey, basically uncovering untruth in your life and realizing the necessity to make changes. Now, that said, you know, it sounds so ominous, but it's an inner process. You will want to do this from within yourself. Is anybody here who has experienced something like that? Like your entire sort of life? I mean, Janet, you called it the collapse of a previous framework that you had, right? So I suppose, um, I don't know, bits and pieces of your journey, I know this for a fact, you know, that a lot of things in your life have changed. But can you guys all sort of see, even if you just for a moment contemplate about your own spiritual journey and look back, how much in your life has changed as a consequence of you starting to seek truth, starting to seek to connect with the deeper you, and perhaps also higher power. Anybody here who has not experienced any changes on any level of their life through spirituality?
Yeah, no, my journey took a sharp turn in my early 20s, and like I was on a trajectory to, you know, kind of graduate from university and go into whatever field it was I was going to go into, and it just took a complete 180, and I went in a completely different direction. And for the rest of my life till now has been a search for that truth, and everything changed. Absolutely everything. My relationship with my family, my relationship with my friends, my career direction, and it has been a constantly evolving process ever since.
It's like you're not even the same you anymore. I mean, you are in essence that we can all feel that, right? But you know how I said last time, sometimes it feels like you've lived several lifetimes in this one lifetime, because with each of these stages that you went through on your spiritual journey, you experienced yourself new and your framework changed. You know, the one that Janet was referring to earlier. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and continues to do so, like
Mm-hmm.
in remarkable ways. Like even just in the last 2 months, you know, I've
Mm-hmm.
got my wife and my daughter telling me what a different person I am. You know, just because of things that are happening to me now. It's just
Mm-hmm.
remarkable.
Yeah, so this is something, and I know we also have a lot of healers and therapists and practitioners here among the audience. So there's something to keep in mind for you, especially. Okay. Yeah, the reason why people get overwhelmed, why they, you know, get scared, or why they basically stop, you know, the continued development is because they did not expect that to happen. And a lot of times they're not making the connection either. So they're seeing things as this sort of series as unfortunate events without realizing that all the things that are collapsing in their lives are the things that are not true. Yeah, it's basically, yeah, the universe fulfilling your order. Yeah. Show me what is not true. Show me what is bad for me. Show me, yeah, what I need to purge. Okay, and a lot of times that comes as a very uncomfortable or discomforting experience for our ego, because our ego has that trait, that property, that it wants things to stay the same, it wants things to be predictable, it wants things to be secure. Ego, our small I, is not interested in change, in growth, in expansion. This is also the reason why we can't use it for our spiritual journey, which I'm sure many of you have encountered. You know, just leads to sort of a coloration, a variation of ego, the spiritual ego. Yeah, and then spirituality is seen as a sort of a specialness of some kind. Yeah, and for some time, you know, that may give you like a sense of superiority, or, you know, whatever makes you feel more uh, valued, until that collapses as well. So there's something about this journey that is, well, sort of, you know, that forces us to like this bone crushing honesty with ourselves. And it takes a long time. The ego puts up a good fight. Yeah. And that is, you know, what we experience as, you know, one of these main issues, and often, you know, the first one. the next one is, and this is related to life changes, it has to do with, us accepting the nature of what spiritual reality is. We will experience physical changes. Things in our body change. Things in our, how we feel with things, like be it food, be it, doing certain activities, hanging out with certain type of people at certain type of places, um, literally feeling our body change, okay? Increasing the body connection, which later turns out to be a really, really important tool, but at first it's quite disconcerting. Now, some people are lucky and they experience something like a relief. Yeah, thinking of, all these practices that people start out with, mindfulness practices, deep breathing, meditation, yoga, all these things that are fundamentally, helping our nervous system to calm down so that we can feel our body, so that we can feel our emotions, so that we can feel our thoughts a little more clearly. But it often also comes with hands-on physical changes. Yeah, anybody here who has experienced that or is experiencing that? Where your body begins to develop different preferences, where you get sick, kind of nauseous in certain situations, at things that you used to do, but you can't do this anymore. Where you get super, super tired or exhausted, be it traffic or being around lots of people, stuff like that. Like where you have hands-on, yeah, new experiences in your body. It's not just, the framework and, like, how you sort of mentally resist, what you are uncovering or discovering. It's also that your body, sometimes it goes into resistance, sometimes it goes into like a beautiful sort of rejoicing. Yeah,
Yeah, this
both can
I mean
happen.
everything you say, Yona, is true. And some, from one side of the fence, before you have any awareness that even to consider that my my sensibility and my sensitivity could get more and more sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
At least I have the consideration to go, oh, maybe something has healed and I'm more sensitive to that now. Whereas before it would be an external blame a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more to, I think a lot of this, especially like with what you were just talking about with going to classes, like going to landmark education or stuff like that, is really becoming the adult as a human, not the adult, I have a job and I get paid and I have a house, but the adult of awareness. So the adult to be able to have the observation and the wisdom to have a wide perspective of choices of what could be going on, especially if it's all busy and you haven't honed that immediate, being able to immediately know is very possible and our normal state, but with a lot of entanglements, it's harder to discern sometimes. So yeah, and
Yeah,
then
so
like
there's both in one, right? Life changes, like this energetic sensitivity on one hand, where you
yeah,
get much more um, uh, differentiated feedback, I want to say, as to
yeah,
what
yeah.
works
There's
well
more
and what
to it.
doesn't.
And there's also, but one of the like bright lights in this, rather than it feeling like, oh my gosh, it's a little bit heavy, is sometimes after maybe a meditation or things that seem indirectly related, like a good night's sleep, not just a good night's sleep, do I wake up and feel better, but I wake up sometimes and feel like I got some help, like there's something that took care of itself on its own without my ego and my brain having to know about it. So to me, that's a physical symptom as well. It's like a relieving. It's like a good feeling.
Mm-hmm. So trusting in yourself, it's this sort of, at first the energetic sensitivity can be, again, quite disorienting, because suddenly you have these symptoms that you never had before, and you kind of have to contextualize them, right? You're going to have to sort of form your own roadmap now. Okay, what does this mean? Is this mine? Is this somebody else's? Like all these kind of questions. And then, you realize that there are certain things that you just don't want to do anymore. You feel repelled by certain things, or you feel attracted to certain things that help you, feel more expansive, that help you feel lighter, like you said, So these are quite severe things that can happen in the beginning of our journey without us even knowing what is going on. Again, here, the necessity to exchange, because it's so individual, yeah, that we end up doubting ourselves or doubting others. Yeah, so this is also often the phase where people start, sort of feeling sort of the energetic load that is there, and where they come to the conclusion that the world is all dark, the world is all evil, all people are kind of hostile. Yeah, so you become more sensitive to not just the good things, also the darker things, the things that are heavier on you. And at first, you feel this is like another thing on your plate. Yeah, so this can then lead to whatever other issues you have in your life. Say a toxic relationship or a toxic workplace, or like all the things that can occur in our life due to like trying to be like how others want us to be, or like living our false self identity that basically aligns us to something that is not true to us, that creates constant friction. At first, these energetic symptoms or these physical symptoms, they feel like it's another thing. I know a lot of people who experience the energetic sensitivity as a burden, yeah, and that goes on top of all the things that are already hard for them. So here, we need to understand that this process of change within our bodies, yeah, that is a fundamental process that has to happen when we begin to tune inward. Yeah, it's as we are tuning inward, we are activating our spiritual organs. We are forming them. Yeah, and our energetic sensitivity is a part of that. That's where, you know, forming your own, lexicon of sensations comes in. That's where the language comes in, Cindy, where you start talking about it and you start sort of increasing your literacy, your spiritual literacy, and you're learning to categorize things, and so that you don't have to be so scared when these things happen. You understand why they're happening, and sort of what it is telling you, yeah, what this guidance is that Janet, that you just mentioned, yeah. When I get sick, yeah, like in my stomach, by talking to people, certain people, or when I say yes, even though I should say no, okay, then that's a gift. All right, this is your spiritual organs starting to function for you. They're telling you, there's something wrong here. That's not true, or whatever the issue is. It's giving you feedback. So this is important to understand, that these physical symptoms, these energetic symptoms, that they are part of your spiritual body developing, refining. yeah, evolving. Yeah, once you start this journey of spiritual development, new spiritual organs will form. And when you learn this, when you go to courses and so forth, the first thing that you learn, mostly coming from Eastern traditions of yoga, etc., Hindu-based, Sanskrit, Vedic-based, or Buddhic, is you learn about chakras, energy centers. And that's something that will help you to navigate that. So once you realize that, okay, there's a sort of a system to it, there's a pattern to this. And whenever I feel this or this or this sensation, all right, that's related to, let's say, my root, and root questions in my life about, physical and material security or karmic issues. Or whenever I feel something in my throat, it has to do with expression and so on. So you start learning to navigate this. You can't navigate it if you don't feel it. And you can't feel it, okay, if you don't know about it. Okay, so it is the awareness. Yeah, that's why in my chakra courses, I always teach that it is your paying attention. Yeah, you're directing your focus to your chakras, is activating them, is clearing them, is, turning them on. Yeah, and having them start work for you. This is how this goes. It is the moment you pay attention to it. This includes all of the spiritual or the aspects of spiritual reality. You will begin to see more. Again, seeing not just visual. You will begin to perceive more. And the more you perceive, the more need you have to navigate this. So you have to educate yourself, on what this is. And part of that education can happen through exchange with others, just so that we don't feel alone, that we don't feel, that there's something wrong with us. And the other part is indeed sort of consciousness work, where you learn, new, larger frameworks, of reality, where you learn about your energy bodies, where you learn about the different, the other bodies that you consist of, that reality consists of, that the cosmos consists of. All right, and then you start to form a new map inside of you that will then begin to feel more and more familiar as you go. The third issue that I see for people beginning their journey is psychic stress. Okay, so psychic stress can be a consequence of the first two, okay, that, now, you're not just dealing with your 3D issues, you're also dealing with spiritual issues, and you can't quite put it together yet. You feel overwhelmed, you have all these physical sensitivities, you feel somehow punished by life, or, see this as your, sort of burden to take, and you like feel basically like a sitting duck. You feel like that you're under constant bombardment, from energies or things that you see or things that you perceive. That you basically enter the spirit realm, and get fried by it. You have sort of too much insight into it without, any ability to process it. That's what we call psychic stress. However, psychic stress can also occur, when you, just sort of begin to realize that there are greater cycles. Yeah, this is the reason why I so extensively report about collective energies, because there are some, elements that you are exposed to that are not just of your own spiritual reality. There are out of the cosmic reality of things, or the collective reality of things, okay? Outer things like the lunar cycle, like planetary cycles, and energy fields and so forth, that are not personal, yeah, that are bigger than you. And like weather conditions, yeah, energetic weather conditions, as I call them, they constantly fluctuate and oscillate and have an effect on you. And when you have no way to contextualize this, then you have a tendency to think it's all just you, yeah. And you feel helpless and disoriented, yeah, up to the wazoo. And all you can do is shut down. Yeah, I know that many of us here, this includes myself, experienced psychic stress. Yeah, sort of undefined, just general psychic stress at a very young age, like where we just felt overwhelmed by what we perceived. And as a consequence of that, perhaps shut our spiritual experiences, our spiritual antennas down. Anybody here who experienced something like that at any point in your life, where you felt like the whole thing is it's just frying your noodle, and you just want to turn it all off? Anybody here who would like to share something about that?
I did turn it all the way off at a very young age. And the weird thing for me was going through life and just being sort of uninterested in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think I told you this in the very beginning, I just feel like I'm in the wrong movie. Something, major is missing, and I didn't know what it was, but I had shut it down because I
Or
couldn't
misplaced,
handle it.
right? Like kind of like a cuckoo's egg, like where you landed on the wrong planet.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And no matter how much, I immersed in it, and, and I love my family, I love my kids, but that wasn't the end all of everything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It was something much, much bigger was missing, and I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, the feeling of something missing can also create stress, psychic stress.
Yeah.
It can create this sort of obsessive seeking. And oftentimes if the ego, if the mind isn't trained enough, yeah, and the ego is in charge, okay, it leads to obsessive stuff. Yeah, it leads to addictions. It leads to sort of externalization of everything. Yeah, constantly seeking, constantly striving, for the next high. Okay, that can also be a symptom of psychic stress. Yeah, like believing that we need a high, okay, in order to, I guess, compensate or equal out, all the lows. Seeking that was what is missing. That's what that is. That can also be a source of psychic stress. Thank you, Cindy, for sharing. Jared, you said, yes, you experienced this several times in your life, and that you shut things down because it just overloaded you. You also have your hand raised. Do you want to share something?
Oh no, Jona, sorry, I thought I had my hand not raised.
Okay. No, it's fine.
I have experienced that multiple times. Just that complete overload where it's just an inflow, a complete inflow, like the floodgates have opened. And,
that's the best way to describe it. Yeah, the floodgates just were open, and there was no way for us to stop it, other than closing it off entirely.
Yeah, that's right. Because you can't navigate your way through it, because the current is running so fast that there's no way for you to what's up and what's down. So you have to kind of shut it off at that point, because
and push down. Like there's nowhere to put it. There's no container to hold.
No, and it's also quite dark, right? I mean, and I know this for myself, and I know this for many of my clients, that it doesn't just feel overwhelming and exhausting and stressful. It's actually the nature of it. Yeah, the nature of it feels so dark. Yeah, I mean literal darkness. It's literal darkness, so it's literally dark. Okay, like as in no light, and I mean physical light. Okay, and it's like suspecting the monster underneath the bed or in the closet at all times. Yeah, at least that's what it felt like for me.
Jona, does this sort of happen because there's such a big variance between what is, these might not be exact words, but what's appropriate for our true self at that point in our life? Like we may have gotten ourselves into such a programmed life that when this starts to happen, that there's such a big variance between where quote unquote I should be and where I am, that it's like there's no touchstone. Again, there's no touchstone. It's like, oh my gosh, this feeling feels right, but it has nothing to do. It's like waking up in your own life and going, how did I get here kind of feeling.
It's a good question, Janet. You know, at first I wanted to say no, but I guess it depends on the level on which you look at it. If you look at it from a karmic perspective, you could, in hindsight, you can see the variance. In hindsight, you can make it out. In that moment, you can't. But in hindsight, you see why you had these experiences, and what was missing. You know, not what was missing as in like what you needed to obtain, but you know, you realize that there was a purpose to experiencing it. Okay, but it may have just not been the right timing yet. So when I call this karmic, and I want to elaborate on that a little bit here today, you know, I really mean things that your higher self has basically pre-planned for you, yeah, sort of in the way of a promise, yeah, like your potential. So this is how I understand your question with the variance, the discrepancy between what you could do and what you're not able to do yet because you don't have the full awareness of it yet.
Yeah, it's like a kind of a mid-ground as well. But also what I see as you're explaining it is that I think early on, at least for me, I could recognize where it's always going external for the answer. It's very rarely like you get this shift, and do I turn in and say, unless you have a good teacher, oh, I need to work on my compassion a little bit more. Oh, I could be a little bit more forgiving right now, or I could forgive myself and put myself into a better feeling of love right now. Whereas prior to internalizing it a bit and self-educating our feelings, my feelings, it would be like, oh, I need to move, or I didn't make the right, I didn't listen to my intuition correctly. You know, like I had messed up with reading the signs a bit, and then it kind of just shuts down at that point.
It's a judgment. Yeah. I like how you word this, Janet. We all have to, you know, contend with, you know, using lots of sentences to explain that because it's feelings, and that's okay. That's appropriate. A lot of it has to do with, you know, us needing to form the proper framework first. Okay. So when we don't have a proper framework, what we discussed earlier, right, the main issues, then it becomes overwhelming because we don't actually know yet how to, you know, focus on forgiveness. We don't know how to attune, how to align ourselves to, you know, certain feelings that can help or bring us relief, or that can help us you know, to learn or whatever, you know, needs to be done with those kind of confrontations. Yeah, is that clear? Yeah, so this
Yeah.
is, it's exactly how you say it. It's sort of a back and forth. Yeah, so if we internalize more, we start, you know, familiarizing ourselves with our own inner feedback, learning about our energetic sensations, our physical sensations, becoming more aware of our emotions, becoming more aware of our thoughts, you know, about things. Then we learn to master that a little bit. Then we have experiences, you know, inner experiences, and bit by bit, yeah, like you said, it's like sort of stepping stones. This new framework, the spiritual framework, forms that then allows us to understand the message in that. Yeah, it's actually here the fourth point that I'm making, that, you know, going through the dark night of the soul, which is sort of the extreme of that, yeah, where it becomes even more visible. But psychic stress can also include, and must include, the collective and the cosmic rhythms. Yeah. So it's not just the stuff that goes on in you, and it's not just the stuff that goes on in your, you know, environment and your outer conditions. There are bigger things that are going on, and they affect you too. Okay. So like these energetic weather conditions, yeah, that are just occurring as a consequence of bigger cycles going on. Yeah, so let's not forget that. The last point here that I have observed with you guys is that, you know, this experiencing the dark night of the soul, like the rock bottom, so to speak, of identity crisis or something along those lines. It can have many different expressions. Yeah, be it you know, like a crisis that comes to us in form of emotional breakdown or breakup, or you know, like a fear of physical survival stuff, yeah, or you know, some kind of clash of judgments and beliefs and mindsets. Okay, so the dark night of the soul. Let me ask you guys, who of you has experienced at least one dark night of the soul? Huh? Hang on. Okay, there I see your hands. Okay, slowly coming. For a moment, I thought it was just you and I, Cindy. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a if, it's like you said, how many.
Yeah. Um, you know, if I, okay, let me ask you, lower hands. How many, or who of you has ever had the thought, I wish I never started this spiritual journey. I wish I just stayed unconscious and, you know, just lived my life as a happy eco self and, you know, didn't have to deal with any of this. Okay, I see all your hands. Okay, good job. All right, so if you did not raise your hand with the dark night of the soul, but raised your hand with this, uh, you know, sort of regret question, okay, then you probably had a dark night of the soul, but you didn't experience, you didn't label it as such. Yeah, so there's something about the depth of our experience when we set out on our spiritual journey, and the depth of the intensity of that can be of such nature that it really drives us to the edge. Jenna, you mentioned something about, you know, jumping off the cliff. It drives us to the cliff, all right, where it appears that there is nothing else left than, well, I guess, to jump, right? Or to, just trust. I want you guys to understand that experiencing the dark night of the soul, first and foremost, is a very common experience. It is an experience that comes with the spiritual journey as a sign of progress, as a sign of you, literally uncovering untruths in your life. Yeah. So what is experienced as the darkness in this experience is the resistance that your ego puts up.
Jona, how would you yourself, after this experience, relabel? Because dark night of the soul is, again, like in spiritual community, it floats around and doesn't really, even like the word emotion, people can't identify it with it well. How would you modernize, contemporize this to have it seem, what would you call it other than dark night? Is there another way that you feel that would be like more helpful in its phrasing?
I
Or
call it a deeper spiritual experience.
okay.
At some
Okay.
point, you're no longer calling it this way. You're no longer labeling it with, dark night of the soul sounds very ominous and sounds very sort of excruciating. At some point, you realize that it is exactly in those dark nights of the soul that something extraordinary happens. Yeah, that like a purging, a clearing of that which needs to leave, that which needs to be purified out of your life, all right, in order for you to grow closer to who you truly are.
So it's like it's engulfed in so much spiritual energy that it kind of itself makes this distance between the ego world and what you're accustomed to and the true spiritual experience, and it
Yeah, builds
seems
the bridge. The bridge. That's that's what you mean, the discrepancy, the difference. That's the bridge. Okay. It helps you find the bridge. It helps you cross, the threshold, yeah, between material 3D reality, with your ego, as sort of the dominating part of your perception, to your spiritual reality, where your soul, yeah, your true self, your higher self, those are layers, yeah, of your spirit being, becomes the dominating entity, so to speak, yeah, the dominating framework.
yeah,
That's
that
what
seems so
this.
much more freeing too, because
Mhm.
Dark Knight just seems like you just keep getting the same little rubber stamp of the same thing, and it's going to go. It's like a little program in itself, but kind of loosening up and coming up with this what
Yeah,
you're talking about, giving
it
it a
depends on
new
how consciously you can go through this. Okay,
right.
so if you just succumb to, to the victimhood, and the, like, how unfair all this is, and how can God do this to me and stuff like that, and you end up contextualizing this as a sort of misfortune, or something that somebody does to you, yeah, that you blame it on something, you externalize it in some way, yeah, then it will be a program that you will have to go through over and over and over again until you can purge that, until you can let that go. So
Right.
a
You
dark
kind of
night,
you
the
turn
best way.
it into something that it's actually something very sacred, but it turns into this term of blaming, and oh, it's my dark night, or it's my left hip, that same thing. Okay, yes,
It's a
very good.
catharsis, okay? So in healing lingo, okay, the catharsis is the actual healing event, okay? Or let's say the catalyst for the healing event, okay? It purges that which needs to be purified. It's a clearing process. It's not the entirety of the healing process, because you still have to learn how to integrate that, how to, you know, come out with conclusions, yeah, with insights, with new insights. Yeah? So a catharsis is just a purification itself. We see this a lot with energy clearing, for example. People feel good after an energy clearing, but then, you know, 2 days later, they engage in the same activities, the same thoughts, the same sentiments, and pull the same impurities back in. All right, so there's no integration then. Yeah, so in order to complete, say, the whole, you know, healing cycle, the clearing is often the beginning, then comes the integration part, and lastly, the connecting part. Much like, for example, in the physical sense, you know, where first you have to sort of purge the virus or the bacteria out of your system, and then you have to heal, you have to recuperate, and then, you know, you come to the conclusion that you need to strengthen your immune system so that you're not that susceptible to infections. Okay, that's a completed healing process. So you go, you know, let's say the disease, whatever the disease is the catharsis. Okay, that's the purging of, you know, that which is making you sick. Okay, then, you know, realizing, okay, I'm sick, I gotta do something. I need to, whatever, drink some more tea, you know, sleep more, rest more, you know, do something about it. That's the integration. And then, you know, oh man, you know, I should probably adopt a healthier lifestyle. Maybe I should, you know, go out in the sun more. You know, maybe I should take some supplements, eat healthier food, and so forth. That's the connecting with that which is then, you know, more conducive, more life confirming. Yeah, that's where, you know, that's a completed healing, and every healing process, as I mentioned in the beginning, is also a growing process. So if you transfer that into your spiritual growth, you know, the dark night of the soul is just a catharsis. It's the catalyst for, you know, a bigger spiritual integration and connecting process that follows afterwards. So in all practicality, yeah, it is the dark night of the soul that then triggers, yeah, the deeper spiritual insights, and with it your spiritual growth. And someone who's gone through this several times will no longer have the resistance to experiencing something like a dark night of the soul, because they have already experienced the growth maybe once or twice, and therefore they can embrace that. So when you are a little more experienced in that, you're no longer experiencing it as a dark night of the soul. You're experiencing it as a deeper clearing process, as a spiritual process, yeah, that is, you know, hitting you, you know, whacking you on the head, waking you up like a wake-up call that says, here, this is what you need to purge. This is what you need to clear out. This is what you need to let go. All right. And you take that and you do that. Yeah. You follow that. And as a consequence of that, you are starting to feel more connected with yourself. You're becoming more authentic. You're becoming, you know, a more conscious you. Yeah, including, you know, the connection with your higher self, etc. And you begin to choose the soul experiences with an unconscious, yeah, with your ego, later turns into a welcome growing or learning opportunity. You're no longer seeing it as such. You're understanding that there's something that wants to go, something that, you know, you need to do something. Okay. Yeah. Well, you need to change something. And eventually, you know, you're seeing them as deep inner guidance. That said, it doesn't mean that your higher self always talks to you in form of, these deep, intense catharsis experiences. So it's also possible that you have a real positive experience that can also function as a catalyst for you. But that is more something that happens later in your journey, because the resistance that your ego has to change, and to sort of trusting in this new framework, in this new reality that is opening up for you, all right, makes everything so painful. Later, you will have the tiny little experiences. I'm trying to think of one. I just had one today, where we could call them insights, where suddenly sort of a light bulb goes on in you, and that changes everything. And you realize that all you really need to do is to align your life accordingly, and all the resistance goes away. Does this make sense? Yeah, so in the beginning we experience this as resistance, and that is, basically our own duality that we are fighting there. Yeah, it also has to do, of course, with, sort of the framework that we are using, because that's where all our judgments and preoccupations and, all these interpretations lie. Yeah. And then later we begin to realize that each of these cathartic experiences, that they are major true self interventions. They're actually your higher self yelling at you. Okay. And the more you align yourself to your own spiritual self, your higher self, the less it has to yell at you. It just can just whisper into your ear and say, you might want to check on that one, honey.
It's like this. I recently started noticing this about myself too. Again, like, to me, it was a variance that something was going okay, and I was like, Janet, it's going good. How about you just relax? I mean, it was literally this little kind of, I had to make an energetic shift because something was going smoothly, but I yet wasn't fully connected with the fact that something was going smoothly, and that it's okay to have a life that's under control. And if you don't get something done, you can just stop and reevaluate your day and then say it's okay to go to bed. It was like this kind of, it was like a little slow motion suddenly was enabled to me to be able to say, oh, look, that actually went right, smoothly, or whatever.
This is a typical trauma symptom, okay? So that has to do with your baseline of normal. Yeah, so
Yes.
people who have had a lot of trauma, they always suspect the whack on the head, the next minute. Okay, of course it is something that you need to get used to, but at the same time, when you have a certain level of self-mastery, when you are aware of your physical sensations and what this is telling you, when you are, tuned into your spiritual guidance that comes from within your true self, when you have aligned your life, in ways that lead you to a more authentic being, in this physical world, then overall you have less resistance. Okay, and then you still have to deal maybe with some remnants from your past, okay, that have taught you that there's always something unexpected, or there's something, some kind of lion that could lurk around the next corner. Then that is what you need to overcome. All right, because once you have a certain level of self-mastery, then you can learn to trust in your abilities, your higher faculties, and you can deal with things as they arise. Yeah, you begin to be able to deal with things in real time and don't need to think about what might be around the next corner. Yeah, because if there is something around the next corner, well, then you'll deal with it if it is. And if it isn't, or if it won't, then you don't need to waste your energy on preoccupying yourself with what is.
I have a question with that, and I hope this sounds clear. Is this, because to me it's, just, again, it's a subconscious energy. It's kind of like, I don't know, the little kettle just starting to boil a little bit when, the fire isn't even turned on. That, until that subconscious energy of like kind of nervous and then things go smoothly, does it just continually, until it's gone, keep manifesting more things that are negative?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
I'm just gonna say yes here. Okay, it's not. It's a bit more complex than that, but in general, yes. Because of what you're tethering yourself to, because of where the focus of your energy goes. It goes to the negative. It goes to the dark. Okay, it goes to the end of things. It goes to the, I talked about this last time. The higher faculty or the lower one. Okay, and this is a really, really good question here in context with our topic, making choices, choosing our path, because right there is where the awareness needs to set in. So the fact that you were asking
You have to have the muscle at that point to go, okay, no, yes, I don't accept that, and I'm going to make a different choice right now. Even whatever it is.
It's not about accepting. You just choose.
Right.
Just, okay, I can choose this and this. If I choose the what ifs and I should already prepare for the lying around the corner. Okay, you become aware of the consequences that this has.
Yeah.
Okay, and the consequences are that you're tethering yourself, you're binding yourself to a negative outcome. Even though it's only energetic, and for someone who is, not aware of the mechanics yet, this might sound a little magical, but it really isn't. It's
right.
Quite easy, actually, once you get it. All right, your energy is either aligned to what is life embracing, life, empowering, conducive to growth, to evolution, or it is aligned, and this counts for any sentiment, any thought, any choice, or it tethers you, it binds you to what's contractive, what is decaying, what is, basically, the dark.
I've equated this, like at the gym, I noticed, and however hard I'm working out, that I'm about to go on to the next exercise, and if I have a resistance, the one that comes to my mind that I go, oh, I don't feel like doing that, that's the one I choose.
Well, and that's good. Yeah, that's good. That's actually spiritual wisdom. Spiritual wisdom is to realize that whatever your inner resistance is, okay. I mean, there's exceptions to that, because sometimes it's just stupid to challenge yourself.
Within like
but let's say it is something that you set out as a goal. Okay, you set out, I want to, strengthen my core muscles or whatever. And and one of the exercises that really help your core muscles to grow is push-ups. But you hate push-ups, you hate because it hurts. Yeah, like I'm just making this up now.
So then you gotta do 50.
Yes, something that I do with exercise that I can strongly recommend, because it really shows how I deal with things, is if you have the goal to do a certain number of sets, a certain number of repetitions, always do one more. Always do one more.
I'm like, oh, that was hard.
Just
and I go, do it again. Go and 10 more.
Yeah.
Because
one is
set
enough.
out in the world that you think that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you get stronger. But no, you have to like make yourself do more of what you need to do more of to make that progress.
It's because when you understand how your ego works, okay, you realize that, growth is always right outside the comfort zone. Okay, and whatever feels comfortable, should make you suspicious. Yeah. Now, when it comes to physical exercise, obviously there's limitations to that, but the growth always lies, where, we challenge our ego. That's why I often drop this phrase, it's always backwards. Yeah. So whenever you feel like, oh, I've got it, now I've got it figured out, now I'm understanding it, now, it's easy and so forth, that's when you have to be careful, because that's a notion, that's an ego notion. Okay. Remember, you get the ego for free. All right. But your I consciousness, yeah, your higher I, your higher self, you need to work for that. You need to work for that. You need to nurture that. You need to feed it. Okay. We all get a light, sort of a minimal light, like a pilot light in a furnace, as sort of the mark of our inheritance, yeah, the divine spark. We all get that for free, but it's not developed. Yeah, we get the ego as sort of the survival mechanism that keeps us alive, yeah, that ensures that we go through this lifetime. But your light needs to be nurtured, your flame, okay? Yeah, what the light that you have available in form of light for life force and also spiritual understanding needs to be nurtured. It needs to be refined. It needs to be ennobled, and it happens only when you can see that your ego, again here, not the visual seeing, understand, that your ego is fundamentally not interested in that. Your ego is only interested in maintaining the furnace, not in growing the light. So that statement, just to speed up the conversation here a little bit, also then leads to a whole other question, namely, what do we need that light for? Do we even need that? What happens to people who never ever enter any kind of spiritual development? Let's just discuss this here for a second. What do you guys think? What happens to people who never enter a spiritual journey?
Oh.
I mean, you guys all had thoughts about, oh, I wish I hadn't ever started this. So, there's got to be something like a feeling or whatever that you have with, what it's like to just stay unconscious.
To me, it seems like some of the first things that happen is disease. You start to people get sick.
All right, that is a possible consequence.
Yeah.
Of not entering or not listening to these inner sensations or these the inner guidance. Okay, but that's sort of the most negative outcome. Let's just look at it from a larger perspective. Okay, so let's see it from more like a human evolutionary standpoint. Okay, so you have this potential, okay, to be this higher self. Yeah, you have this potential to become enlightened. Everybody does. Everybody does. Okay. But you don't answer the call. What happens to people that don't answer the call, not referring to their 3D life, but to their soul life, their spiritual reality?
Maybe because when you die, they eventually have to die because we're here on Earth, and then the body dies.
Does. Everybody does. Yeah. Oh, that your body dies too, my body dies too. Okay.
So then our spirits already are. That person's spirit is existing in a lower evolutionary state. So the spirit is now goes to where they're actually from at that point. Their energetic state as a spiritual dimension And maybe there it's like they get a lecture from their higher self or something. That's what I started.
Lecture.
Go to higher self school
Yeah.
until you get promoted to either go to a next higher spiritual realm because you learned somewhere in those ethers, or you still refuse and you got to go to a even slower evolution. That's my guess.
Yeah, so you guys are on the right track, but a little black and white. Okay. So you have the right to choose to stay unconscious. You have the right. And many of us have lived hundreds of lifetimes in total unconsciousness. That's totally okay. That's your choice. It doesn't mean that you devolve. You can devolve, your soul can devolve and, sort of descend, yeah, into the subnatural. But that happens through choices that you make. Yeah, like how I called this earlier, when you tether yourself to darkness, or you tether yourself to the unnatural, or you tether yourself to death, you tether yourself to, all that lies in the underworld. Now, when I say tether, which is a little more conscious than just, unconsciously, going through your own darkness. Okay. That would be somebody who, for example, yeah, this is actually a good example. Someone who doesn't believe that there is a spirit world, someone who doesn't believe that there is a God, someone who, just sees the human life as a sort of, whatever randomly colliding atoms. Okay. Machine-like, yeah, something that needs to function in some way, that has no soul. Okay. And sort of full-heartedly believes in that, believes that they don't have a soul. Yeah. That is an alignment, okay, that basically it goes against our natural evolutionary path. Now, I've had many of these discussions with people who, are full-on materialists or atheists, and I understand their logic, okay, but their logic is flawed, okay, because they have abilities, we all have abilities, for example, to think about the future, to think about our own existence. We all experience consciousness within ourselves, even if it's on a low level, okay? And that means that this had to be somehow be conceived by some kind of consciousness. So consciousness itself is just a different way of calling it a being, yeah? A being of higher intelligence or higher power. Okay, so the mere fact that we exist with this consciousness, which is, fundamentally different from how all other living beings on, on Earth exist, animals and plants and so forth, contradicts the understanding logic that we are just machines. Okay, so this is not possible. So someone who aligns themselves to a materialist life view, okay, and the total void of a life, aligns themselves to darkness. Not evilness, it's not the same, but darkness, like there is nothing there. And when somebody does that, and this is very interesting for you guys, because we need to consider that when your framework is in such a way, when you align yourself to, let's say, there is nothing, there's no soul and there is no spirit world, okay, you will also not be able to experience it. because you don't speak the language. You don't have a map for that. You wouldn't even know that you were experiencing it if you did. Okay, and therefore, there is something, sort of in a way self-fulfilling. I think that's where your comment, hinted at. There's something self-fulfilling about what we align ourselves to. And this is relevant here to, choosing our path. And that's what we all need to become very, very conscious of. And we've already learned that there's issues with not being aware of yourself, not being aware of your own body, not being aware of your emotions and your thoughts, your sentiments, and your way of thinking and your way of choosing. We already know that there's issues there, okay? But what we need to put into consideration is that the framework itself that we're choosing determines sort of what kind of spiritual reality we are manifesting for ourselves in our afterlife. And now we kind of arrived where we left off with part 2, namely, this whole sort of consideration of, what life is for, or this contemplation, what life is for, and why we even feel something like a spiritual impulse, and what the purpose of all that is. So we've already agreed that we are feeling something. It's a feeling, it's a knowing in us that we are not just a body, we're not just a physical thing, like a machine, a bag of flesh. We're something else. We are a consciousness that is having an experience in the material reality. So when we say that to ourselves, when this is part of our, or as soon as this is part of our framework, I am a soul with a body, then that means that we are acknowledging that there's a spirit in us, a being. We are a being. We are a spirit being, okay, that is having an experience in the material, physical reality. And that also implies, obviously, that when we die, we've already discussed that, our body dies, our physical body dies. We know this. Physical science, nature science can describe the process of decay, to the T. Right? We already know that the physical body decays. But then there's some other aspects of our being, okay, that still need to somehow be metabolized or transformed, or processed in some ways. And this is then, what this whole sort of, I guess, afterlife, for most spiritual teachings, the afterlife is, the process of dying. What happens in that sort of transformation, transubstantiation from the physical, the soul living in this physical body, sort of converting back into this pure spirit being. Okay, and in that process, and this is why we have to really think about this with our rational mind a bit. All spiritual teachings, with no exception, have substantial writings, substantial traditions, and I mean, at least 75, 80, sometimes 95% of a spiritual teaching is all about preparing for the dying process, for the afterlife, if you will. Keep that in mind. Okay, there's a reason for that. And that is that if we are agreeing that we are fundamentally a spirit being that is having an experience in the physical material reality, that there is a very important process that occurs when we leave this body. And there's a certain order in which that happens. Yeah, we know that, at least you guys know this, you know, that we have an etheric body that, you know, holds our form together, that, you know, is linked to our physical body. Yeah, and that's the one that first sort of starts to disintegrate. Most spiritual teachings see these 3 days after death as sort of that process where our etheric begins to dissolve. Okay, and in that dissolution of our etheric body, all the imprints, you know, that the physical body had on the etheric, you know, get sort of filtered and get re-experienced, yeah, get purified, you know, and then, you know, basically fed back to our spirit being, yeah, to our soul, as sort of what we've gathered from this life. And the same occurs with our astral body. Our astral body, you know, is not as closely connected to our physical as the etheric is, but it still is, you know, the part that connects us with our soul, yeah, through the silver cord. It is the ensoulment, yeah, basically, yeah, in the physical body that needs to be tethered, severed, and, you know, this sort of filtering and purification, you know, on extracting of this information, yeah, of the experiences and so forth that our soul gathered in this physical reality, then gets fed back to our soul. Okay, so there is a process that occurs, okay, just like how there is a process to incarnation. What happens when our soul actually enters into a physical body is the reverse of that process, in which we now here upon death have to re-experience the spiritual value of all, you know, the thoughts and the sentiments and the choices that we have made in our life. And here it comes. This is, you know, what like all these spiritual teachings have in common. Some see it as a judge or as a scale or as a, you know, some gods or whatever, some other spirit beings that, you know, are evaluating, you know, all our thoughts and sentiments and choices in this lifetime. But, you know, you could also just imagine yourself, your higher self, going through the catalog of all the thoughts and sentiments and choices that you made in this lifetime. In Christianity, it's called the purgatory. It's like reliving, yeah, all these things, and near-death experiences inform us about this. It's like this sort of runs through your life, okay, and evaluating which of the experiences are of spiritual value, of, you know, things that help you to progress, that help you to grow as a soul being, as a spirit being, and which tether you to the lower aspect of you, the darkness, the underworld still. And this is, you know, where most of your guys' understanding of karma is still quite a bit diffuse. Many of you think that karma is sort of a punishment or like a judgment, or, you know, something that comes upon you, you know, based on whether you were good or bad. Okay, that's actually a misconception. Because really what happens is that everything that was untrue in your life, everything that tethered you to, your own darkness, all right, is re-experienced in this process of dying as excruciating pain, as something that severs, that disconnects you from your soul. All the unfinished business, all the unhealed stuff, all the regrets, all the blaming, all the anger to God, all the, you name it, is experienced as excruciating soul pain. And all the spiritual thoughts and the spiritual emotions and the spiritual, like what we call higher vibratory choices in your life, they are being metabolized as food for your soul. You can even feel this, when you listen to spiritual talks or read books or talk with others about spirituality, when you engage in something that really, really connects you with your soul, it's food, it's nourishment. It lights up your light. It increases your light. This light that you are feeding through what you're doing right now at this moment, engaging in spiritual perspective, spiritual frameworks, contemplating things, trying to verbalize or articulate things, that happen in your spiritual reality, in your inner you. That is nourishing for your soul. It's connecting with your soul. It's enlightening you. It's increasing your light. And that's how you can picture that. Because when you leave this physical material experience, all right, you're going to have to orient yourself in the spirit realm. You're going to have to learn, you have to know how to navigate there. And if you will, you can picture it as a flashlight or whatever, but you need your own light to show you the way. All these alignments that I do every month that have something in there like remember your light, follow the light, I am the light, all these kind of things. These phrases that speak to your soul, that help you to increase your light, are there for you to navigate your spiritual reality in your afterlife.
Jona,
Each and
I have a
every of
question.
these alignments does that. Yes, go ahead.
Would this contribute, this pain contribute to people's, like, people living now, and then we talk about people's fear of death, that being part of a spiritual darkness, and growth, that people's fear of death is kind of subconscious, knowing that when they die they're going to have to go through this pain because they haven't, or not willing to, or something, heal themselves, essentially.
Well, there's a lot of statistics, a lot of studies that have been done on that, and they show that people are not actually afraid of death and the afterlife, not as much as they used to be, like in the Middle Ages or, 2,000 years ago. People nowadays, in this sort of height of materialism, aren't actually so afraid of death. They're afraid of dying. They're afraid of the physical agony that they're experiencing, while they actually should be afraid of the soul pain that awaits them.
Yeah, because I'm reflecting
Yeah.
also, I've had I've definitely had moments where I knew my deepest fear in my life, and I, you know, in my panic, I think caused some disconnect, that I wouldn't be connected. You know, that I literally was like, oh my God, have I messed up? Am I going to be disconnected for, you know, the rest of my life? I literally have had those kind of moments.
That's a gift from your higher self that you are able to feel that in your physical experience. Okay, so that's a sign of your formed spirituality, because it sends you these reminders, it sends you these wake up calls. It says, remember, remember, remember. It's not about this physical reality. Now, it is about this physical reality in the sense that you came here for a purpose. You came here to gather these experiences and remember, or, you know, learn, depending on how many times you've already done this. All right, that the spiritual reality is the one that what all this is actually about. Yeah, so what it's
in
really
reality,
about is to learn to make that choice. This is a very,
right.
very distinct moment, and anybody who has spiritual awareness can actually pinpoint this. It's an
That's
everyday
what,
kind of thing.
sorry. Well, that's kind of like my next question was like, well, then I can kind of feel right now like I could kind of put myself, it's a little bit like, oh, okay, I'll go tiptoe into that room. What do I need to take care of so that the death experience is clearer? Like, what's still there that's going
Yeah,
to be
that's
painful
your
that I
higher
can
self.
take care of now? Like, it's like
Yeah,
an inquiry, right?
yeah, that's your higher self. You know, and this typically comes to people who are able to have this kind of insight during their lifetime. They've already gone through this several times. You know, there's a certain level of memory of that soul pain that you carry in you that kind of informs you,
Ah,
you know,
I see.
maybe it's about something else here, you know, maybe it's not about gaining maximum pleasure and, you know, earthly wealth. Maybe it's about something else. Okay. And these reminders, yeah, these wake up calls, yeah, that our higher self sends us, okay, they, you know, obviously kind of be overwhelming and they can be confusing. We've already talked about this. This requires a continual, you know, dedication and daily routine. Okay. But really all it is to realize that, you know, everything that you are doing here in this physical 3D material experience, everything you think, every sentiment that you have that includes your attitudes and your views, okay, and your thoughts, which include your preoccupations, your judgments, and all actions, all deeds, all choices you make create your afterlife experience, create your spiritual reality. They build your spiritual reality. This is what you're going to find yourself in when you die. This is an extremely important insight that we understand when we talk about manifestation, we talk about co-creatorship, that we realize that we are constantly co-creating on different levels. We are constructing our afterlife. We are building our own hell worlds, or our own heavens, depending on what we're aligning our choices to. That said, it doesn't mean that we always have to be right and that we always have to, you know, those are earthly terms, right and righteous and just. It's all earthly. It all comes down to, you know, like the map of consciousness and all these things that we've discussed, you know, a million times, lower and higher vibratory goals. Yeah, so material goals, lower vibratory goals, have to do with survival. They have to do with, you know, achievement and wanting to be better and competing and avoiding problems and seeking pleasure and maximum comfort in life. Spiritual goals, immaterial goals, have to do with love, with connection, with purpose, with meaning, with peace, fulfillment, health, abundance. Yeah, and forgiveness and understanding and empathy and all these kind of things. So it is in the moment that we are choosing, and this is something that you can only pinpoint when you have a certain level of consciousness. So if you're unconscious, you're not aware of what you're choosing until you do become aware, and that is then what enlightens you. All right. The moment you realize that all your thoughts are actually based on fear, that all your thoughts are actually based on anger, that all your sentiments that you have, reflect a victimhood or an externalization or a blame or anger at God. How could God allow this to happen to me? Yeah, or to the world? Yeah, that all your sentiments, be it your selfishness, be it your materialism, just sort of maximum gain and owning, your survival anxiousness, yeah, or even your obsessive seeking. Those all tether you to the lower, to the underworld, to the darker, yeah, the lower part of you. And like you have correctly understood, they slow you down, they hinder you, they disconnect you from your higher self.
Would you say that, like, you talk about these tetherings and everything, and to me, I'm getting, I have a certain feeling about it. And definitely a recollection of moments where I've been shown where every little breath you take, every little exhale you make makes a vibration, and you just watch it. I mean, I remember seeing that and feeling it. But would you say these tetherings are kind of like, they're really like energetic leaks, aren't they? Like, you got a hole in the dam, and it keeps your energy keeps going there. And
Yeah. Some of
okay,
these leaks are systematic, some of them are, can be caused by trauma, can be caused by abuse, can be caused by mind control, can be caused by collective programming, so multitude of reasons. We've already covered that in all the energy talks and sacred self-healing exchanges and so forth, how this happens. Okay, but the point is not that it happens. The point is that you have a choice regardless. So the more you hone in, so this tethering is a little more than aligning. Okay, so the unconscious person has a way of sort of letting things slide, justifying or excusing things away. These little lies, it's the untruth. It all comes down to truth and untruths, basically. That's why connecting with our true self is such a fundamentally important process. Where we allow our true self to emerge. And once you start building that relationship, it comes to you, it comes forward, it begins to become clearer and clearer to you. Every single thought that you have, every little choice that you make, is a choice that either aligns you to your higher self, yeah, or to, the lower aspect of yourself. So, when you hear this and you feel scared, all right, then let me remind you of something that I shared a few years back when my son, I think he was like 4 years old or 5 years old, and he was having difficulties with his mind and, kept on having these fear thoughts. And it just sort of said to him, imagine a world where all thoughts you have and all emotions that you have become real one day. At first he got angry at me, and then he started crying, and he said, "Oh, Mom, don't say that. I don't want that. I don't want all my thoughts and all my emotions to be real." That's the level of a 4 or 5-year-old. Okay, if this scares you, this kind of information. We set out on this journey to individuate ourselves, to form our spiritual identity, to get our spiritual ID. Okay? Yeah, much like, going through puberty and adolescence and becoming a full-grown, person, soul that can make its own choices, that chooses its own light out of its own inner experience. That's the goal. That's the goal of your spiritual journey, is to choose your own light. But in order to choose your own light, you're going to have to know your light. You're going to have to understand darkness. You're going to have to go through your own darkness to know the difference, to learn how to discern between truth and untruth. You got to experience the effect, the consequences untruth has on your life. Now that on your 3D life, that's the first one that we encounter. Yeah, because remember, dark night of the soul, catharsis, all, the purging of untruth. Hormonal is progress. Okay, that's a purification. You're starting to purify your life, your light. Okay, but then ultimately also to purify a spiritual reality, which in effect then becomes your spiritual, your soul progression, your soul's path. Everything has a consequence. And it's only our ego, that tells us, "Oh, no, that's fine, there's no consequence to nothing." Especially those who don't believe in the spiritual reality, because, if you negate that there is a spiritual reality, then you don't need to worry about anything, right? The experience in your spiritual reality, then, for someone who is, basically, materialist, that doesn't believe in the spiritual reality, is total darkness and total loneliness and, complete disconnect. So your dark nights of the soul, if you want to say it that way, is a memory, and also a foreshadowing, could be either, okay, of what it feels like when you're completely disconnected from your higher self and ultimately the divine. So let me repeat that. The goal of your spiritual journey is to choose your own light. And in order to choose your own light, you got to know your own light. And in order to know your own light, you're going to have to nurture it. You're going to have to build a relationship. You're going to have to, feed it. You have to grow it. It becomes bigger and bigger with all your spiritual development. And in order, to do that, you're going to have to learn all that is untrue, that is dark, all that is dark in you. Only so can you discern outer darkness. Because mind you, you're not alone in this spiritual reality. There's lots of other beings there. And as you also know, there's a lot of fallen beings. There's a lot of beings that are caught in hell, all right, that want nothing more than, your little pilot light, whatever leftover you have of light, to claim for them. And it's usually easy fodder because you don't really have a spiritual identity if you are completely unconscious. So it's easy to take that away from you. You don't even know what you're giving up. That's another thing to consider. You know, how dark forces fundamentally, you know, sort of, or systematically, you know, hinder you to connect with your own light, and, you know, sort of tether you to these untrue realities that there is no light, and even more deceptive, that there is no darkness. Okay, so denying that there is darkness does not prevent you from, you know, encountering darkness. Of course, you can hold the pillow in front of your face and pretend nobody can see you, but that too is more of a 2 or 3-year-old version of dealing with reality. Jared, I'm seeing your question here. You mentioned metabolism and food for your soul. What's the greater function of the metabolic process down the hierarchies? Could you, if you can, briefly elaborate on that, just so that I understand the scope of your question a little better?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what, because you mentioned like through the dying process when you wake up in the when you're in your etheric body and your metabolite, you're experiencing all of the unprocessed stuff as excruciating soul pain, and all of the you know, the beauty and the gains that you've made, they are metabolized in your through your etheric self back to your astral body. So just hearing that made me realize, like like listening to knowledge of the higher worlds at the moment, and Steiner talks about how when you're in that mind body, sorry, the heart mind state. He never said heart mind, but you know, when you're in that state and you're having those higher thoughts, they're not really thoughts, but you know what I mean. That that experience is actually the archangels metabolizing your thoughts in that moment. So you're in that moment, your thoughts are food for the archangels. So that just made me think that, like, it goes all the way. It must go all the way down, because your body also has a metabolic process, and you know, you go through, when you die, you go through a metabolic process. Do you know what I mean?
So you're referring to the spiritual hierarchies, and you know, how you know, this sort of gradual process of filtration, or I mean, those, I don't know. I'm
that's a good word.
I use these words, but I don't know if they're a bit too mental or whatever. But you know how that functions. So
yeah,
there is something like that. You got to be careful there to mentalize that too much, because you know, if you don't actually have a good grip on your own physical versus your etheric versus your astral versus your eye consciousness body, okay, then it's kind of useless, you know, to know, because there's no test that you have to you know, complete, where you say, okay, the physical is the nourishment for the angels and the etheric for the archangels, and you know, your astral is actually for, you know, even higher spirituals. The hierarchies is not linear. Okay, the reason why I'm sort of evading this a little bit, so the answer is yes, there is an inner connection there. With that is because we haven't even touched on the cosmic aspect of that. Okay, we are in a continual, you know, sort of paying forward or building co-creatorship, I said earlier, yeah, continually. So here we can talk about conscious manifestation in 3D. All right, that reminds us of our co-creatorship. Okay, and we all understand that. With positive and negative thinking, you know, like very basic, you know, law of attraction kind of stuff. Okay, and then we have sort of the spiritual reality, which, and Jared, you a hard warrior, you practice this with me in the energy course. There's a mirroring that occurs in the etheric. Okay, so once you understand that, what you manifest in the etheric with all your sentiments, thoughts, and choices, then you start to get a little better feel for where you are materializing on. Materializing wouldn't be correct, but we have to like call it something, okay, of making it become real. All right, on which level you are making things real. Okay, and then when you think of your astral and your eye consciousness, okay, we're now starting to interact on levels that have to do with building sort of a whole new world, building a new earth, building a whole new even larger framework. We're in a continual process of co-creation. We're not just delivering food to our own soul, not just delivering food for higher spiritual hierarchy so that they can do other things with that. And when we talk food for the soul, we're talking about light. Okay, we're talking about light and warmth. We are also, each and every single awakened soul, especially those with a spiritual ID, building on, say, this may help you to understand this, the evolution of the earth, for example, which is a much higher spiritual hierarchy. That's the level of the Elohim. Okay, and we are also building, with our light. Okay, or contributing, or co-creating. Okay, the evolution of the solar system and of the entire cosmos. So this is much, much bigger than our little ego, can fathom. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to. I wanted to get that bigger picture. So that's super helpful. Thank you.
Just remember it as a how I always say, energy goes two-way. It's a two-way street.
Yep.
Just really picture it this way.
Yep.
Picture it
Got it.
in the way that you continual co-creatorship.
Yeah, awesome.
Continual, and whatever it is that you're aligning yourself to is being energized. Okay, and at a certain level, when you go really low and you're willing, to give up your I consciousness, your spiritual ID. All right, that's when you're feeding the underworld. That's when you are feeding, when you're building, the other kind, the other kingdom. So there are a lot of things that we don't fully grasp, and we continually, explore these realms here together. But I do want to also send you home with the understanding that, everything that happens when we die, not everything in its entirety, but sort of as sort of the general process, kind of happens when you go to sleep too. Okay, and this is something that you can use as practical understanding, of what is actually going on inside of you, or inside your spiritual reality when you're going to sleep. This is something that requires you to understand how the cycle, at least sort of in the microscopic world, goes. So when you are awake, when you are in this physical body with your awareness, which is in its lower or default expression, the ego is the lower I. Okay, Yeah, you get the ego for free. So the body comes with an ego, okay, and it is then the astral that injects the high consciousness or Christ consciousness, as we often call this, because that's how it comes to us. It comes to us as the consideration that feels like empathy, that feels like compassion, that feels like, equality, that feels like, caring for others, wanting to be of service for others. That's why we call it Christ consciousness, because those are fundamentally the trademarks of what Jesus or Christ, sort of showed and told, okay, through his life, okay, that this is the way, how you get to the light, okay. And as you are, sort of have, these infinite lifetimes, yeah, that you come here into this physical reality to practice that, to refine that, to ennoble that, all right. You're building, your spiritual reality, but each time, and this is like in our daily lives, yeah, transfer to our daily lives, yeah, as you come into this physical reality where there's a sort of a descent of your soul that occurs, you are, using up these etheric life forces, okay. So the etheric is the container for your life force, yeah, that injects your body, okay. And the more spiritual awareness, the stronger light you develop, the stronger your life force also becomes. It's like a recharge in a way. So this feeding process, yeah, that we just talked about, it doesn't just happen in that way. It's not parasitic. There's no like archangel that takes, your spiritual light away. It's quite the opposite. It's actually the other way around. Okay, so this life force, okay, that is contained in our etheric, that comes out of a higher spiritual hierarchy, yeah, that gives the fuel to the physical, okay, to hold the soul in it. And every day, when we go about our physical life, okay, we're using up a little bit of that uh, life force, okay. Yeah, the body, when if we don't sleep for like 3 or 4 days, we die. The body cannot contain itself, all right. It's just a hole. It really is just a bag of flesh, but it's inhabited by our soul, yeah, via the etheric that holds the container for our soul. Our soul is immaterial. Yeah? The physical is dense, it's material. So the etheric is kind of like the in between, okay, that holds, and those of you who do the chakra work with me, the unified self work, understand this a little better maybe, because those are all sort of frequency layers that we have, yeah, chakra fields, okay, and they then form the container. Anyway, so when we, during the day when we're awake, we're using up some of that life force, and when we go to bed, when we go to sleep, what happens is that, obviously our physical, then disconnects, it disconnects from, our like soul in a way, okay. So our soul goes back, yeah, recharges also through those daily experiences, okay, and our etheric begins to repair our physical, yeah. So our soul untethered, it's not fully untethered, okay, so it's still, linked to this body. That's why when we wake up, it takes a moment, but we can identify ourselves as ourselves, okay. But really what happens is that your body, gets sort of recharged and repaired by your etheric. And this is the key of spiritual or etheric healing, because whatever template you hold in the etheric, which is basically determined by all your thoughts and frameworks that you have. That is the template that is being used to repair, yeah, and recharge your physical body. So as you are asleep, okay, your soul goes off and, sort of does its thing, in the astral world, and, already, goes home with a few of your insights and your, your spiritual thoughts and so forth, this nourishing, this feeding the soul process, yeah, and your body, gets repaired, recharged, okay, so that, when you wake up in the morning, all this goes back together. So what I want to say with this, and you can find this in many spiritual texts where they're referring to the little deaths that we die every night. Okay, it's very similar to what happens in our dying process, except for that, the physical and the etheric don't disintegrate, at least not fully. They do a little bit. That's why we age. But, and here comes the good news, if you dedicate your life, if you dedicate your consciousness, yeah, to, your own spirituality, if you consciously feed your light during your awake state, okay, yeah, you build, you grow your light, you connect with your true self, your higher self, you work all this, okay, yeah, you collect all this beautiful food for your soul, you also get this back. You get it back as life force. You get it back as vibrancy, as luminosity. You experience this as an elation, not necessarily bliss, but as an elation. You're starting to feel how this two-way really works in real time. Yeah, so I wanted to send this home with you so that you understand that this is not that life is not an audition for the afterlife and that you have to wait till you die. No, this all happens in real time. It is just that at the end of this lifetime, yeah, so when you do the final metabolizing of this lifetime, all right, that you will begin, to feel this, all the regrets that you have and the disappointments and, whatever, sort of dark aspects, you're struggling with, and that are unresolved, that are unhealed, okay, that they make you so, they make you desire to wanting to come back and do better next time. So you can see now why I'm saying, when I talk about karma, how there's a fundamental, sort of misunderstanding is it's, when we believe that it's something external. Karma is your higher self's safety bolt, insurance policy, all right, that you actually stay on your path. Because the reason why you come back is because you chose to. Because you realize what all these missed opportunities and these, things were. Where you did not choose your light, where you chose what disconnects you. Yeah, be it egotism or materialism or, seeing the world as hostile. Yeah, so fear and anxiousness can also disconnect you. That's dark. Or where you were angry at God, you realize, yeah, what pain that causes for yourself as your, your material reality, all your thoughts, your sentiments, and choices here in the material created your spiritual reality as you are experiencing your spiritual reality. And guys, this is, basically the reason why it can be, especially for those of you guys who, feel this call, all right, to do, this spiritual work, yeah, to become able to do this in real time, to be able to both feel this agony, the soul pain in the moment, to listen to it, knowing what that means, and correcting yourself, choosing the light, because you understand the consequences this has. Yeah. It's basically about truth and untruth, guys. And the heart mind that you mentioned, Jared, is also a component of that, because that's a mechanism with which we become able to do this in real time. Yeah, the unified self, or, I have so many different words, or ways to call this, but it's always the same thing. All experiences in our 3D reality are the outer expression of an inner process. All experiences in our spiritual reality are the outer expression of our inner experiences during our lifetime. Let me say that again. All experiences in your 3D reality are the outer expression of your inner processes. This is fundamentally the conscious manifestation paradigm. Now you realize that everything that you manifest is somehow, preconceived through your consciousness. Yeah, it's an outer, it's a materialization of your inner attitudes, your inner sentiments, and your thoughts, your alignment, basically. But now it goes a step farther, guys. All experiences in your spiritual reality, and mind you, if you train your spiritual organs, you can begin to observe your spiritual reality while you're still in your physical life. Okay? Now, all experiences in your spiritual reality are the outer expression. Okay, so the pain, the agony, or the elation, that you experience in your afterlife, of all your inner experiences during your lifetime. In other words, everything, guys, everything is recorded. Everything is recorded. Everything has an impact, has a consequence, has, basically a manifestation process linked to it. Nothing just poofs away. So we are all creating our own spiritual reality while alive in 3D reality. We're all creating our own afterlife. So if you guys are concerned about where you're going to go after you die, okay, well, then start becoming more aware of the reality that you are creating through your inner thoughts, sentiments, and choices. You don't need, the 10 Commandments or some preacher or even me to tell you, what disconnects you. You can feel it. You may not be able to pinpoint it at all times. You may not be able to, know a better way, but nobody talked about being perfect, being, all that in a bag of chips. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the moral consideration and, the basically the conscience, okay, the conscience and consciousness, yeah, of what all these things that you energize on a day-to-day basis, what kind of reality they are creating, not just here in 3D, but also in your spirit world. What they're doing to your soul, if they're nurturing, if they're nourishing, if they're loving, if they're expanding, or if they are disconnecting, if they are contracting, if they are separating. And that is the purpose of life, to figure out just that, so that you can make an educated choice, so that you can, not because somebody else said so, not because you're afraid of going to hell, no, because you choose it. You choose your own light. And there is so much more to this, guys, but if you just take that home, yeah, and keywords such as spiritual ID and stuff like that, I just made that up, okay? But this is a feeling, and this is about your spiritual identity, your authority, your sovereignty, your spiritual personality. That's what it's all about. Who you are. Yeah, that's a big topic, huh? I mean, I thought about it, for the last 3 weeks, how I can round this up in just one more part. And, it's a lot, and there's a lot of different spiritual esoteric concepts that we had to cover first. That's why it took a while to get to this, right? In the parallel workshop series, Electrification and Etherization, all right, we're going to dive even deeper into this, I mean, the mechanisms, how this happens. But here, it's really important that we understand why we are on this spiritual journey. Of course, we want to heal, we want to purify, we want to do all these things, but that's just the beginning. Yeah, there's so much more. Questions?
Well, it sounds like the next step when you talked about the other parallel etherization, electrification, that's going to start to answer, because I know that I can reflect on things and say, it's like the world having to hear every single day, don't litter, even though it's obvious. It took the longest time to, and even now when you say it, I'm like, there's so much blocking that idea is even true. Like at one point I was like, what are people talking about? I stand as my own self, and like there was like such a disconnect. I even now still feel remnants of it, being like, well, why is that important? I mean, it's really so weird.
What do you mean, littering? You mean like physical littering, like throwing batteries into your house trash?
Like what? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't mean how. I didn't understand how you meant litter. Don't litter. Don't litter.
Well, I just think there's things in society that people could be reminded of daily. Not obviously not go buy a new iPhone. It's more like, like brush your teeth and don't throw the garbage on the ground. Put it in a trash container.
Okay.
And this seems like one of those obvious things to me as well. It's like, and Oh, and by the way, remember your inner light and to live for that in whatever way. It's
When
just
you tune into your inner light, okay, try to throw away your garbage on the street. Try it. You'll experience it as pain. It's painful.
Right.
You may do it and brush it away, but you know it's not right. Nobody needs
Right.
to tell you that.
So
I mean,
it's not
it's maybe
just
not,
about your inner light accomplishing something. It's about your inner light living properly.
we all have the same, yeah, we all have the same journey. We all have the same purpose. Okay, so there is no, an accomplishment or, I'm, hooray, I get a trophy because I got there earlier than you. No. What it shows you when somebody does not have that kind of consideration is that they're pretty disconnected. Okay. It doesn't have to make you angry. It doesn't have to, have an effect on you. Just move into a neighborhood where people have a high enough consciousness or conscious level where they don't do litter, where they take care of their front yards and, where they keep it beautiful and sort of collectively, even though they don't know each other maybe, but, just due to the energy field that they're creating, creating a more conducive environment. Cindy, your hand is raised. Is that a question or did you want to add something?
Mine is raised?
Yeah, no, doesn't
Oh,
matter.
sorry.
If
No,
not,
no. There we go. Oh my
did you
gosh, it's
want to
been
comment?
raised.
Did you want to comment on anything or ask
Wow.
anything?
It's so incredibly interesting to me, and I can't wait to keep going, because there is this impulse that we know, and I feel it too, that there's so much more, and just learning about it and hearing about it, when you can feel the truth in it, is just incredibly empowering. So thank you so much.
I'm checking something here real quick. So there's an article that I wrote about spiritual fast food. Did I publish that already? Hang on, I'm checking my own website right now.
That sounds interesting.
Yes.
Spiritual fast food. Completely appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys are signed up, for my website. If you are getting the new articles when they come out, I just send out emails very sparingly, because it's ongoing. There's like ongoing material, and it's if you are, like with me in the Energy Training Club, then you get all this in real time anyway. But yeah, so there's something very important about this process of feeding our souls through spiritual thought, spiritual sentiment, spiritual education, contemplation, and obviously also our daily spiritual routines. Okay, but there's also something that I need to warn you of, and that is spiritual consumption. Okay, so spiritual consumption can give us the illusion that we're feeding our soul. All right, and that is when we just sort of feel elated through the intellectual, sort of light bulb that comes on. But it's like artificial light. Okay, it's like electrical. It's like an electrical light bulb. Okay, it's not your true inner light that turns on. So anyway, yeah, I wrote an article about that, spiritual consumption, and like how that also relates to the transfiguration of spiritual teachings nowadays, yeah, into spiritual fast food, yeah, which is basically a hijacking of some of these esoteric concepts that have deep truths in them, but you know, it's like just like a core or a speck of truth, and then send people to the wrong exits. Okay, so this is something that we all need to observe within ourselves. Okay, yeah, that we don't just consume spirituality. Yeah, because your ego can take that as sort of the illusion, yeah, of an enlightenment. Okay, so that's maybe something that we can then address in the next three-part here within this issues with awakening or building a bridge series, where we will dive deeper into the perception of things. Yeah, so here I just introduced you know, these different realities and how they relate to one another. The harder part is really you know, the process of learning, you know, how to differentiate and verify our perception, so that it's not just my say so, you know. So it's also something that you can experience and discern for yourself, and that's quite a difficult process where most of us get stuck for, you know, several lifetimes. Yeah, because our ego is quite pervasive there, you know, as it can give us, you know, sort of a quote unquote good feeling, yeah, that we have, you know, accomplished something or that we have learned something. A lot of times I see that, and that's why many of you here live, okay, who work with me closely, I've said this many times to you, you don't need any certifications anymore of that. Okay, so it's that can be sort of a sign of spiritual consumption, really, because ultimately the healing process or the growth process is not concluded until there's a certain level of embodiment that occurs. Okay, and the more you embody, you know, your own light, the less, you know, the fast food you want. Okay, you want your own inner experience, and that comes through you know, having a good spiritual routine and working with your inner perception, because the most powerful illusion and also temptation that we experience here in 3D is through self-deception. Okay, so self-deception is the most powerful form of you know, misguidance, if you will. So that will be the topic for our next 3 workshops. Yeah, 6 hours talking about the different aspects, you know, of how we perceive it, which requires you guys to fully, you know, immerse yourself into your experiences and share and ask questions. Okay, so this will be more experience-based, because perception is something that can only come to us through our own internalized experience. All right, everyone. I see you guys very soon, and I hope you enjoyed this workshop and any of the other workshops that are out there. And we are heading into the Easter time, so this is always a time where these aspects, afterlife and incarnation and resurrection and also redemption, come into the foreground. Yeah, so the Connect with Your True Self is going to be on March 19th. Yeah, something, as you know, I regard as one of the most important spiritual practices, and not just, you know, in this energy session form, you know, where we do this live and talk about our experiences, but really on a basic, on a daily level. So remember these alignments that I have on SoundCloud, guys, they're all attuned to help you to connect with your inner light, okay? Every single one of them. All right. So if you are wondering how you can, translate this into your 3D life, then the answer is pretty simple. Connect with your soul, connect with your higher self, the spirit being or your true self, no matter what you call that, several times a day. Yeah. Foster that relationship. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do everything right. You don't have to sound spiritual or look spiritual. This is all 3D stuff. All you really got to do is remember that your inner light needs your attention, okay? And whenever you're going through a cathartic event in your life, when disease or unhappiness or emptiness or fear, this is a wake-up call for you. All right. So do this several times a day. It can be 1 minute, it can be 5 minutes. That's why I make these alignments. Okay. So that at least you have a reason, okay, to stop for 5 minutes. Yeah. All these words, okay, they work on that soul level. They work with your higher self, okay? So as you are, most of them are written in first person, okay? As you are hearing them or thinking them or reading them, all right, you are feeding, you are, nourishing that relationship, okay? And the same, of course, applies to all the sacred self-healing meditations that are built in a specific order for you to have that experience in a way that you can reproduce it, in a way that you can sort of systematically go through the layers that are needed for you to, understand and feel, both your own light. Okay. Love you guys. Stay conscious.